Good afternoon. It is remarkable the power of free lunch in a university setting. I know why you guys are here. Uh, if a surgeon went to sleep in 1975 and woke up this morning, a very talented surgeon, say from Harvard Medical School, I hope no one in this room would let that man or woman operate on them this morning. The world of medicine has changed far too dramatically, and that person actually wouldn't really understand what was going on in a modern operating room. The same is true for a computer programmer who went to sleep in 1975, even a truly remarkably innovative one, and woke up this morning. You would not let that person tackle your IT problems um, in a big university setting, or probably even at your home network. And the same is true of a newspaper editor, certainly a telecommunications engineer, even an ad exec who had gone to sleep in 1975 and woke up this morning. All of those industries have changed so dramatically that somebody who was both brilliant and current in 1975 really wouldn't understand what was going on today. However, if somebody who ran a water system went to sleep in 1975 and woke up this morning, you would have no qualms about letting them work the overnight shift at the Cambridge water facility because, in fact, the world of water hasn't changed in the last 35 years. It really hasn't changed in the last 40 or 50 or 60 years in many ways. The good news is that is about to change. Water is on the verge of undergoing the same kind of revolution in approach and thinking that the whole rest of the world has undergone. And I think that's really, really good news. I am delighted to be at MIT, a place I never could have gotten into when I was your age. And I want to thank in particular Pat Flynn, who's done yeoman service to get me here. I'm actually here all the way from Mexico City, which is where I now live with my family, and Jason J. For arranging to bring me here. I was in Boston this summer and had a great conversation with them, and so I'm delighted to be able to talk to you all. There are lots of places I talk about water um, where people are genuinely interested in water. There aren't that many audiences that I can talk to who can have a dramatic impact on the way the world of water works. And I think you all in this room, in part because of the place you go to school or the place you work, can have that kind of impact. And I think you will have an impact. And so I hope I'll leave you with a sense of how to do that today. Um, as Professor Jay said, I am not a hydrologist. I am not a geologist. I am not a meteorologist, a climatologist. Uh, I am just a reporter. I've spent the last 4 years traveling around the world trying to understand water. My own journey began with bottled water. Is there a single, I see a commercial bottle of water right there. Is there only, there are a couple. Um, I grew up in Miami, Florida, and we go home to visit my parents, the grandparents, that is, almost every year. And we were staying in a hotel 5 years ago, and there was a bottle of Fiji water in the room as we opened the door. We had actually driven from Philadelphia to Miami, so we were a little worn out. And my wife is a brilliant journalist in her own right. She edited every paragraph of every page of my book. She's also the kind of woman who walks into a hotel room and when there's a bottle of Fiji water there, she removes the tag that says, "This bottle is here for your drinking pleasure, and we will add $7 to your hotel bill if you drink it," takes off the lid and drinks it without even thinking. One bottle of water that costs more than a good six-pack of beer is remarkable. There's a good margin on that. I can tell you the business case on putting the Fiji water in the room. And we had never seen Fiji water before. Show of hands. Who in the room does believe that Fiji water comes from Fiji? So most of you don't think Fiji water comes from Fiji. Well, we'd never heard of Fiji water before. My wife loved Fiji water. Um, Fiji water, of course, comes from Fiji. You can't call it Fiji water and say it comes from Fiji if it doesn't come from Fiji. And I actually said to my wife, do you think that water really comes from Fiji? And where the hell is Fiji anyway? Some vague idea of where Fiji is. And I took the empty Fiji water bottle back to Philadelphia in our luggage. I had, after all, paid $7 for it. And it in our unsold house in Philadelphia, it still sits on the windowsill in my office. And when I got back to my desk, I did a little research on Fiji. It turns out that 53% of the people in Fiji do not have clean, safe drinking water every day. So it is easier for an MIT student to walk into a convenience store or somebody who lives in Orlando or Austin or Kansas City and get clean, safe drinking water from Fiji than it is for the people in Fiji to get clean, safe drinking water from Fiji. And that, for me, sort of opened a door into this strange world of the business of bottled water. I was forced to go to Fiji and see where Fiji water comes from. If anybody ever forces you to go to Fiji, you go ahead and go, knuckle under. By the way, where is Fiji? If you get in a plane in Boston, you fly 6 hours at 550 miles an hour to Los Angeles and turn left and fly 11 hours at 550 miles an hour. That's 17 hours at 550 miles an hour. And look down, there's Fiji. It is far away. And the water comes all the way back to us from Fiji. And so the question for me was, how is the global economy that we so admire, how has it come to provide Americans with a product they absolutely do not need? Bottled water from Fiji. You can like it, you can enjoy it, you can find it entertaining, you could think it's the best water you've ever drunk. No one in America, under any circumstances, needs water from Fiji. While the same global economy denies that product to the people who actually need it and have it in Fiji. And so I ended up writing a magazine story about where the business of bottled water had come from. And the response to that story was really extraordinary. It turned out people were quite curious about water and about the source of their water. And so I was inspired by my own journey into the world of bottled water, not to write a book about bottled water, but to write a book about the larger issues around water. And so in the last 4 years, I have stood at the bottom of a 500,000 gallon tank, sewage treatment tank. It was empty, but it had only just been emptied. I said, can I go down and stand at the bottom? It's the kind of moment when the wastewater treatment guys look at you like you're really crazy. Well, why not? How often do you get to stand at the bottom of a sewage treatment tank? I spent a month in Australia, a country that looks and feels just like the United States, and where 5 out of the 6 major cities in the country have almost run out of water in the last 10 years, and they've had to remake their entire economy, an economy that looks just like ours, to accommodate less water availability. I spent a month in India, a place that has more than enough water and more than enough money and more than enough smart people to provide water to its people, and yet where half the people in the country don't have access to clean water every day, and half the people in India is 660 million people, twice the number of people in the US. I wanted to see how you come to have a country where you have enough water and yet you don't provide it to your people. I've stood on the shores of Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States, at a spot where just 5 years previously there was 100 feet of water where I was standing. And it's fine to hear about that. When you stand on dry land and look up and imagine 100 feet of water missing from a lake that's 110 miles long, that's a lot of water that has disappeared. I visited the largest soup factory in the world, the Campbell Soup Factory in Napoleon, Ohio, a single factory that uses as much water as a town of 55,000 people every day, to see how they use water. They use it in sort of fantastic, fabulous ways. I visited the best fountain design company in the world, the company responsible for the fountain in front of the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas, and the largest fountain in the world, which is in, of course, Dubai. Where else would you have the largest fountain in the world? Because I wanted to spend time with people who thought about the emotional impact of water. 300 people at Wet Design. All they do is think about water as an artistic medium, as an expressive medium. That was a wonderful 3 or 4 days. I did the water walk with a group of women and girls from an Indian village out 4 kilometers to a well and back, carrying water on my head, because hundreds of millions of people get their water every day by carrying it. It took me an hour. I spilled half the water I was carrying, and I was only carrying enough water to flush a US toilet once. So what I learned is carrying water is not a great way to get your water. Not a tremendous insight, but very interesting. I've experienced the cleanest water in the world. I'm going to tell you the story of that water at an IBM microchip factory in Burlington, Vermont. And I put my hands in what I think of as the dirtiest water in the world. The Yamuna River is the river that flows through the heart of Delhi, India. It's considered one of the sacred rivers of Delhi. It makes up 2/3 of the flow of the Ganges. When you get out on the Yamuna, it is jet black, and you can hire a guy to take you out on a wooden boat onto the river, and the entire surface is pocked with little bubbles. It kind of looks like a root beer river, but it does not smell like root beer. The bubbles are methane. The river is literally producing methane as it sits in its banks. And the EPA standard for safe human contact with water is 500 E. coli in half a cup, 500 E. coli in 4 ounces. The Yamuna has 10 million E. coli in 4 ounces of water. And people, every hour of every day, people bathe in it and wash their clothes in it. Interesting question. Are you making your clothes cleaner or dirtier by washing them in the Yamuna? I came to the conclusion from my journey that some of the conventional wisdom that we hold dear about water is wrong. First, there is no global water crisis, and framing water problems as the global water crisis, akin to the global economic crisis or the global climate crisis, is actually a mistake. I think it discourages people, it deactivates people. All water problems are local. There are 1,000 serious water problems in the world, but they're not really connected to each other except thematically. And that's not bad news, it's good news. Only the people in the community having the water problem can solve that water problem. And once they do, no one can undo their solution. So I think talking about a global water crisis, which is often a well-motivated attempt to energize people, is actually very misleading and accomplishes the wrong thing. Business is way ahead of ordinary citizens and governments in understanding that a new era of water scarcity is coming, and business is doing a lot to try and both insulate themselves from that scarcity, find ways to cope with it, and also to invent the technologies and management techniques we all need to cope with that scarcity. So I'm actually glad that business understands something that the rest of us don't, and that there are smart, creative people working on it. I don't think we want to let business get too far ahead of the rest of us, because we don't want water in the control of corporations in the end. But I'm glad there are creative people out there thinking about this, and there are. Almost everywhere in the world you go, water is free or essentially free. Free is clearly the wrong price for water. I'm not going to talk a lot about that today, but I think it's something you all should plant in the back of your minds. Products that are free are poorly used, they're wasted, people don't think about them, there's no incentive to innovate. As the guy at the Campbell Soup plant said, when I propose $10 million renovation to the way we use water at the plant to save $100,000 worth of water, I am laughed out of the executive offices at Campbell's. So free is the wrong price for water, and in fact, the poorest people in the world pay the heaviest price for free water, because their free water is really poor quality, and they often have to spend hours a day walking to get the free water. We'd all be better off if we paid a little bit more for water. And finally, we have been living through a golden age of water that goes back almost exactly 100 years to the first decade of the 1900s, and that golden age is over. The golden age has been characterized by water that is unlimited, safe, and free. We never think about turning on the tap. We never think about how much water is going to come out, whether the water is going to be there. We love to grouse about the quality of our tap water, but in fact, in the US, tap water is unthinkingly safe with very rare exceptions. And in fact, although most people in the room don't pay a water bill, even your water bill is not for the water. The water's free. All US public utilities charge is the delivery charge. And most water bills don't even cover the cost to get the water to you. That era where those three things will be true together, unlimited, safe, and free, I think is over. We just don't realize it yet. We will have more than enough water to drink and more than enough water to wash our clothes and water our lawns, but we will start using the right water for the right price. Hopefully, 20 years from now, we will not all be flushing our toilets with purified drinking water. That's not the right water at the right price for the right purpose. We're headed from an era of unlimited, safe, and free, a kind of golden age, to what I think of as an era of smart water. And that's what I want to tell you about today. I want to tell you what the era of smart water looks like. I want to say sort of upfront, there are three things I hope you guys will take from our conversation today. And at the end, I hope there's plenty of questions and pushback. The first is a sense of the energy and creativity that is coming to an arena that has had neither energy nor creativity for 40 or 50 years. We are on the verge, I think, of a new water revolution. The second is a sense of urgency about tackling water problems. Water problems are by and large solvable, but you can't solve them quickly. You can't solve the problems of a city in a week or a month or a year. You have to change people's habits and practices, and that takes time. So the sooner you get on it, the sooner everything will be different 5 years from now. And finally, I hope you'll take away a sense that you all, literally, the people sitting in this room, can make a huge difference if this is something you care about. This is an arena you can jump in and have a huge impact on quickly. And I hope when you're done here, you will. I like to give people a little sense of water with numbers. I'm a journalist, so I'm a word guy, but I think numbers have remarkable power. And I always like to start with bottled water because that's the arena where I got my start. In the United States, we consume 1,250,000,000 bottles of water a week. 1.25 billion bottles of water a week. 4 for every man, woman, and child in the country. If you did not have your 4 last week, somebody had 8. We spend at retail $21 billion on bottled water a year. We spend $29 billion maintaining the entire water infrastructure of the country, all the pipes, pumps, and treatment plants. $29 billion on the entire water infrastructure, $21 billion on bottled water. We spend almost as much on water delivered in crushable plastic bottles as we do on the entire water system. So when people say there's no money to take care of water infrastructure in the current political environment, I say not only is there money, we are actually already spending it on water, just 500 milliliters at a time, just $1.29 at a time. The cost of bad water in the world is extraordinary. We hear this all the time. I was sort of looking for a new way of understanding this. It turns out that the equivalent of the National Science Foundation in India did a study 2 years ago and came to the conclusion that India spends 2% of gross domestic product treating diarrhea every year just from bad water. In India, 2% of gross domestic product is $30 billion a year, $400 million a week just treating diarrhea. India spends more on diarrhea than the total GDP of 95 of the 180 countries in the world. More treating diarrhea than the total economic output of Panama or Jordan or Iceland. Mind you, in India, there is not a single city, those in the engineering who come from the engineering world or are interested in engineering, not a single city in the 35 largest cities in India that has water service more than an hour or two a day. 22 hours a day in Mumbai and Delhi and Hyderabad and Bangalore, no water service at all. So the cost of bad water is extraordinary. One of my favorite water statistics is a statistic of my own invention. I also spent almost a month in Las Vegas trying to understand the water system in Las Vegas. You can't be in Las Vegas without noticing the golf courses. There are more than 50 golf courses in Las Vegas. So I decided to calculate the amount of water required to play a round of golf in Las Vegas. Every 18 holes of golf for every player in Las Vegas requires 2,507 gallons of water. Every time a golfer steps to a tee, every single time in Las Vegas, 139 gallons of water have been used to prepare that hole for that golfer. The golf courses in Las Vegas use exactly the same amount of water. In fact, by law, they're limited, as the Imperial Valley farmers use to grow our winter vegetables. Weather is changing water availability dramatically. There's plenty of debate in this country about climate change. There is no debate about climate change in the places that are being dramatically affected by it. We're seeing a little bit of that this year in the US, of course. Texas is having its driest year in recorded history. In fact, its driest year in 459 years, according to the tree ring record. 1775 was apparently drier than the present year. One state to the east of Texas, the Mississippi River, had the greatest flow in recorded human history this year. 1 billion gallons a minute flowing down the Mississippi River. So 300 miles are separating the wettest moment for part of the continent from the driest moment for part of the continent. That's a little bit of what climate change looks like. One of the places I visited was Perth, Australia. Perth has seen its rainfall, its average rainfall, drop 20% in the last 25 years. It has seen the amount of water that flows into its reservoirs fall 80% during that time. So small changes in weather, or apparently small changes in weather, dramatically change the water available for human use. Perth was actually the first Western-style city to almost run out of water. That 80% drop in water in the reservoirs precipitated an incredible crisis in Perth. In the US, we use more water in a day than we use oil in a year. And we use more water in 4 days than the world uses oil in a year. And you can, of course, see the price of oil every 12 seconds on the screen on CNBC during the business day. You never hear about the price or economic value of water at all. There is some incredibly good news about water in the US, which I actually wish every person in the country could know and absorb. We use less water today in 2011 than we used in 1980. We have doubled the size of the US economy from $6 trillion to $13 trillion, while actually reducing the total amount of water we use every day by about 10%. So dramatic progress is possible. We haven't even made much headway on the shower and toilet front while doing that. Dramatic progress is possible. And I think if we can do that, there's more progress to be made here, but anywhere in the world, progress is possible. Okay, let me tell you 3 quick stories of what water innovation looks like, what smart water looks like, at least from my experience roaming around the world. One of the places I went while I was in Australia was a little suburb called Salsbury, which would be totally comfortable and familiar to anybody in the US. It looks just like a US suburb. It seems brand new, mixed use developments, schools, sidewalks, curb and gutter. One of the legendary Australian companies going back 140 years is actually headquartered in Salisbury, a place called Michelle Wool. Australia is still the largest raiser of sheep in the world, the largest producer of wool in the world. This will be the last year that's true, though. China will pass Australia, I think, in 2012. There's 9 sheep for every person in Australia. And wool comes off of sheep incredibly dirty. This is one of the things I love about being a journalist. I would never stumble into this kind of thing in my ordinary life. Just sheared wool turns out to be 55% wool, and 45% plant debris, dirt, and sheep poop. 45% dirt by weight. The sheep, it turns out, are not doing much showering out there in the outback. So cleaning wool is, in fact, a business. That's the business of Michelle Wool. They take just sheared wool, they wash it, and they send it on in the process to the next step. All they do is wash it. And it is, with good reason, called wool scouring. Wool scouring is really just two things: water and dirty wool. That's the business. And about 6 years ago, the men who run Michelle Wool, the Michelle brothers, fifth generation of the family, got nervous. The drought in Australia was 4 or 5 years old. They were worried that they were going to be cut off from their water supply. They use as much water every day as 1,000 Australian families. And they went to the statewide water utility in South Australia and they said, "We're worried you're going to cut us off. We don't think dirty wool can compete with a hospital or a high-tech factory or a hotel in the center of Adelaide." And the water utility said to them, "You all are our largest non-farm customer. You buy $1 million in water a year. We're very happy with our relationship with you. Don't you worry your little head about the water supply." And the Michelle brothers were, to their credit, not satisfied with that. They had actually something that they called, and that I think is a wonderful phrase, water anxiety. What was going to happen if their water supply was cut off? At exactly the same moment, the town of Salsbury, in which Michelle Wool sits, was having a problem that faces a lot of U.S. cities. They were taking their storm water and sending it directly into the Indian Ocean untreated, and they were killing a swath of mangrove swamp along the coast. And the federal government of Australia was about to start fining them. They either had to clean their storm water or pay the fines for doing the damage they were doing. And the stormwater guy and the water guy for Michelle Wool, the stormwater guy for Salisbury, and the water guy for Michelle Wool got together, and they actually solved each other's problems. Michelle Wool put up $1 million in capital, and instead of taking stormwater and sending it into the ocean, Salisbury takes the stormwater and routes it through a series of 750 acres of wetlands, some natural, some now man-made. The water spends about 12 days flowing through the wetlands. There's no other treatment. There's no man-made treatment, no human treatment of any kind. And it emerges from the wetlands more than clean enough to clean dirty wool. It happens that there's a limestone aquifer underneath the town of Salisbury. They take the clean water and store it in the aquifer underneath the town. And then they supply it to anybody who wants it. The number one customer, Michelle Wool. They get all of the water they use for cleaning wool now from the purified stormwater at 1/3 less than the cost of tap water. So they've cut their costs dramatically. There is a 5-year supply of water for the town stored underneath the town. And there are customers lined up waiting to be plugged into this supply of purified stormwater. New subdivisions use it for flushing toilets and watering lawns. People have purple pipe spigots. All kinds of farmers use it because it's cheaper than the public utility water. Salisbury, which was facing this financial burden of taking care of its stormwater, now sells its stormwater and makes a profit of $1.5 million a year. So that, to me, is what smart water looks like. Those two people solved each other's problems and helped each other be more competitive in the wool business and generate revenue instead of costs on the town side. And of course, you're not washing dirty wool in purified drinking water. So that is also smart. By the way, the Michelle brothers were right. The drought lasted long enough that they would definitely have had their access to drinking water dramatically limited if they had not sort of gone in a different direction for their water. The only loser in that whole situation, the South Australia water utility, which lost $1 million a year customer by not paying attention. So that's one version of what smart water looks like. At the other end of the economic spectrum is the IBM microchip plant in Burlington, Vermont, one of just 2 IBM microchip plants in the world. Some people may know computer chips require incredibly clean water to be manufactured. They are built up of layers and layers and layers of circuits, and the pathways on computer chips are now so fine, they not only can't be seen with the human eye or with a microscope, the pathways are narrower than the wavelengths of visible light. They can't be seen at all. So if you're going to wash the layers between production processes, you need stuff that is really clean. You need water that has nothing in it but water. Even the tiniest viruses would be like a huge log across those pathways. So inside the IBM microchip plant, which is 90 acres under roof, there's a separate factory that does nothing but make something called ultra pure water. Ultra pure water is water that starts out as tap water and ends up as the cleanest water in the universe. 12 steps beyond reverse osmosis. We think of reverse osmosis as sort of taking everything out of the water. You take seawater, put it through RO, you get drinking water. They take RO water and clean it 12 steps cleaner. So that's a very energy intensive and chemical intensive, capital intensive process. And the water guys 10 years ago said, boy, the price of microchips is falling dramatically. If we're going to stay competitive as IBM in the chip business, we on the water side need to find a way of helping our company do better. Maybe we could be more efficient with the water. And so the first thing they did, sort of IBM/MIT style, they deployed a sensor network around the water factory. They deployed 5,000 sensors that each gather a data point about water every second, 300,000 data points about their water every minute, millions and millions and millions of points of data about the water a day. And they analyzed their water system. They spend $11,000 on water a day between the water and the energy. And they discovered all kinds of things about their water system just by asking the question, how much do we use? What pressure do we put it under? What's its temperature? What's the flow rate? And over the course of 10 years, they managed to reduce the amount of water the plant required by 30% while increasing production of chips 30%. They increased the water productivity at the plant 80%. They almost doubled it. Here's an example of what they did. The water comes in from Lake Champlain to the plant cold, and it has to be warmed up to go through this ultra pure process. The ultra purification factory needs warm water. At another part of the plant, there are huge air conditioning chillers to cool water to provide cold air to the clean rooms where the chips are made. No connection between the high-tech water manufacturing and the utility water at all. And these guys said, well, why don't we take the Lake Champlain water, send it to the air conditioning people. It's already cold. They'll use it and send it back to us warm. We save on the cooling and we save on the warming. They did 50 things like that in order to almost double their water productivity. Here's what they discovered. They saved $750,000 on the water bill by teaching people to use the water more smartly. They saved $3 million on the energy and chemical and filtration bill. For every dollar they reduced the water bill, they reduced all of the ancillary costs, $4. Incredibly powerful. They actually went through and resized all their pumps after they reduced the amount of water they were using so that they use less electricity over time. So that to me is also what smart water looks like. That is so smart, in fact, that the IBM senior staff in Armonk took notice. They were so impressed with what these guys had done that IBM now has a water division. You can hire IBM to do for your university or your soup factory or your town just what IBM did for itself. So that's a great example to me of what smart water looks like. All they did was measure, right? No technological breakthroughs necessary. Finally, let us briefly visit the city of Las Vegas to sort of see what smart water looks like at a municipal level. Anybody who's ever been to Las Vegas, sort of flown in, you fly in over the desert, and if you look out the window as you approach Las Vegas, it literally looks like Mars. You cannot imagine that there's going to be human habitation anywhere. And then all of a sudden, Las Vegas appears, including the 50 golf courses. It's no illusion. Las Vegas is actually the driest city in America. Of the 280 largest cities in the country, Las Vegas's precipitation is 280. They get 4.5 inches of rain a year. 19 days when there's some kind of precipitation in Las Vegas every year. 72 days when the temperature is over 100 degrees. So it's 5 times the number of days when it's over 100 degrees as when it rains and occasionally snows. For all of that, Las Vegas, for anybody who's been there, appears to be completely obsessed with water. If you walk the legendary strip, the whole place seems to be about water. At the southern end is a huge casino called Mandalay Bay. You walk into Mandalay Bay with 30-story waterfalls flanking the entrance. Inside Mandalay Bay, a 1.6 million gallon aquarium for sharks, a shark aquarium. One casino up is a hotel called New York, New York, which reproduces New York Harbor at about a Porter scale, including the East River, the Statue of Liberty, the Brooklyn Bridge, and a fireboat jetting water 24 hours a day. Next to New York, New York is the Bellagio, which is famous for the fountain that sits out front. 8.5 acres of water, 22 million gallons. When the Bellagio fountain is running, 17,000 gallons of water are floating in the air. Inside the Bellagio, a 2 million gallon stage for the Cirque du Soleil show called O, the French word for water. Right next to the Bellagio, the Mirage, very old casino famous for the volcano that sits in a lagoon out front, right on the strip. Inside the Mirage, a 2.5 million gallon aquarium for Atlantic bottlenose dolphins. There are, in fact, 8 Atlantic bottlenose dolphins at the Mirage, 3 of them born in captivity, which means there are 3 Atlantic bottlenose dolphins that are natives of Las Vegas, Nevada. Let's pause just for one moment and appreciate the dolphins get 2.5 million gallons of water, the acrobats get 2 million, and the sharks are stuck with 1.6 million. Directly across from the Mirage is the Venetian, a hotel built on the theme of being able to take a gondola ride in the canals of Venice as part of your hotel experience. There are Venetian reproduction canals out front, right on the strip in the 100-degree heat. And most remarkably of all, there is a whole network of canals inside the Venetian that you can be gondolaed around in by a gondolier. It's actually on the 2nd floor of the casino. And then my favorite, which almost nobody ever sees, there is actually an indoor artificial rainstorm on the strip inside the Planet Hollywood Casino. Once an hour, it rains on the hour during the week. On weekends, for your pleasure, it rains every 30 minutes. The Planet Hollywood Casino gets far more rain inside than this in a week than the city gets in a year. So this is a kind of incredible display of water ostentatiousness, water opulence in a city that should be obsessed with just the opposite. How do you reconcile that? In fact, between 1990 and 2009, the population of Las Vegas tripled. In that 30 years, the population tripled. The amount of water Las Vegas is permitted to take from Lake Mead is fixed in law and never changes. It was agreed upon in the 1930s. And so, although the population of the city tripled, they got not 1 new gallon of water. So, how did they pull that off? In fact, I think you can make the argument that Las Vegas has become the most water-smart city in the country. Here's how they do it. They have a brilliant water manager, a woman named Patricia Mulroy, and over 30 years, she hasn't asked people to take shorter showers. She has literally changed the water culture of the entire city. So they pay homeowners $40,000 an acre to pull up their grass and replace it with desert landscaping to reduce the amount of outdoor lawn watering. They pay golf courses the same $40,000 an acre to remove unnecessary turf and replace it with desert landscaping. Every golf course in Las Vegas, of which I have made great fun, has a water budget. They are not permitted to exceed the water budgets, and the water budgets are falling about 5% a year to force golf course managers to figure out how to make better use of water. Las Vegas specifies the kind of hose nozzle you can use to wash your car. In law, it's a trigger nozzle. It must automatically shut off. You're forbidden to let any water for watering landscaping fall on a sidewalk or a road, a paved surface of any kind. And Las Vegas has a police force of 11 water cops who patrol looking for violations and writing citations. Since 2000, front lawns in Las Vegas have been illegal. You cannot build a house with a front lawn. Again, to reduce the amount of water used watering outside in a place where it's over 100 degrees 70 days a year. And perhaps most importantly, it is illegal to let a swimming pool or a hot tub drain into a storm sewer. All water must be routed back into the sanitary sewers because Las Vegas recycles 94% of the water that hits a drain anywhere in the city. They take all of the water used indoors, clean it almost to drinking water standards. Tertiary treatment is what it's called. And they send it right back to Lake Mead. That's how you triple the size of your city without adding any new water. They get 1 gallon of water credit for every gallon they treat and return to Lake Mead. And they return about 50–60% of the water they use back to the reservoir. So that's how they can grow while not having any added water. There is no city in America that even comes close to recycling 90% of its water. And so that, to me, is what a water smart city looks like. What has the impact been? The average Las Vegan uses 110 gallons of water less now than 20 years ago. They have reduced per person consumption 110 gallons a day, which is just remarkable. In fact, between 2000 and 2011, the city grew 50% just in that 10-year period. They don't use any more water today than they did in 2000. They have stabilized the amount of water the city uses. So that's what smart water also looks like at a municipal level. And I think the most important lesson from Las Vegas is those are the kinds of changes you have to make that affect behavior over time. Patricia Mulroy looked at the city's growth and water use in 1980 and said, boy, these curves are not going in the right direction. How are we going to change water habits permanently? You can't do that in a month or a week or a year, but you can say, what do we want our water use to look like 5 years from now and 15 years from now? And what do we have to do to make that happen? And that's what they've done in Las Vegas. So the aquariums and the fountains notwithstanding, perception is not always reality. And the most important lesson, small changes in behavior add up over time. I think the most important thing to take from these 3 examples, from the wool company and the little town in Australia, from the high-tech microchip plant in Vermont in the hands of IBM, and from the city of Las Vegas is none of that water behavior, none of that smart water performance required any dramatic technological breakthrough, no national lab. In fact, in all of those cases, people simply had to understand their water use and think about water differently and then begin to take action. And I think that's great news. There is a lot of new water technology coming. I've spent some time with the people at a venture capital fund based in Toronto, XPV Capital, the only venture capital fund in North America devoted to water. They are following 800 water technology companies in North America, most of them pretty small. So there's all kinds of new technology coming, but we have made so little progress in water that just by measuring, just by asking the question, what do we use? What do we spend on it? How can we change our behavior? You can make dramatic progress. I want to leave you with 2 thoughts. The first is, and not to dwell on this, but the first is, because you all go to MIT or are associated with MIT, you have a great opportunity. You can ask any question of anybody in the world, and the chances are you'll get a phone call back or you'll get an email back. And that's a great tool. And you should keep that in mind as you go out into the world. It's a great opportunity, and it also means you can be effective and you can have fun and not be frustrated simply because you don't have access to what other people would like access to. So use your training and the fact that you go to this school to open whatever door you need to, because you can have an impact that lots of people would like to be able to have and can't. Finally, I want to leave you with a thought about water that's a little different than what I've talked about up to now. Part of the point of writing a book about water, I decided a few months in, was to try and restore a little bit of a sense of wonder about water itself. I think we've lost any sense of appreciation for how remarkable a substance it is. One small example of that most people don't realize, all the water on Earth was delivered here when the planet was formed. There is no new water being formed. There's no geologic process for making new water. Plants take water apart in photosynthesis. We put it back together when we eat the plants. But the water budget of the planet is closed. All the water we've got is all the water we've ever had. And it was all made in space. So the guy with the little bottle of Poland Spring right there, all you people with water bottles, that water is exactly the same as when it was delivered here 4.3 billion years ago. That's kind of amazing. There's nothing on Earth that you use every day that looks just like it looked 4.3 billion years ago. And water has a million little qualities that make it special in that way that we have completely taken for granted. Not the least of them is water is fun. We actually love water. We all know what it feels like to stand under a hot shower at the end of a long day, or to leap into a swimming pool in the middle of August, or to race into the waves of the ocean. We all know what it feels like to drink a glass of cold water after a run or a workout, when only water will quench your thirst. And so we all have what I think of as a strong emotional relationship with water and a good relationship with water. And I don't think that's beside the point. We're here sort of thinking about sustainability in the context of the Sloan School. Well, I think that emotional connection is really, really important. We have no emotional connection to the idea of carbon credits. Carbon credits may be a great way of solving problems, but we don't have any connection to them. We have no emotional connection to the idea of fossil fuel independence. We clearly don't have enough emotional connection to mortgage-backed securities or to our own checking accounts. But we love water and we appreciate water. And that sense of connection, to me, is a great tool for helping people make good decisions about water and for driving an era of creativity about how we use it and how we sustain it into the future. I appreciate that. I hope you guys are going to help drive an era of smart water. Thank you.